Marc Lamont Hill official YouTube channel's nightly show called Night School. We every Monday to Friday have not a cable news show, not a podcast, but a global classroom where we break down the most urgent topics, the most controversial conversations, the most interesting debates, I think, going on in the world today. And we don't do the drive-by analysis. We don't do the superficial talking points. No, we do the intellectual deep dive on whatever's going on in the world. I gave you a sneak peek there. We're joined tonight by a very special guest, Ruwa Romman. We'll get to her in 1 second. I just wanted to shout out everybody who has been supporting the show, not just this week, but since we started almost, I don't even know the months. I'll calculate it. But thanks for everybody who's been showing up and showing out. The super chats, the super thanks, the donations, all of it has been beautiful. But this week, in addition to that, y'all have also been giving me medical advice. Yeah, I said I had COVID and y'all been breaking it down, giving me all kinds of natural remedies, giving me stuff to help preserve my voice, giving me stuff to help preserve my stamina, my energy, because I am wiped during the day, but I try to pretty much lay down all day just so that I'll be ready for this evening show. And I am so excited to be joined once again. I'll say it one more time. I am excited to be joined by the Georgia State Representative for House District 97. Her name is Ruwa Romman. She is a very, very, very incredibly interesting and important person, especially these days in the political arena. Ruwa, first of all, welcome. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Night School.
Welcome, Sam. Thanks for having me.
So 3 months ago, let's just say, the Georgia State Representative or even the Georgia House of Representatives was not something that most Americans, even political nerds like me, could say we knew very well. Outside of Georgia, it wasn't a thing.
You know, it depends, honestly, because, again, Trump tried to steal the election here, and my colleagues, before I was even elected, were on the front lines, and I think that was the first time, you know, at least recently, or in the past couple of cycles, that people started to hear about the Georgia legislature, and we handled business. And so folks moved on, and I guess we always have to come back every once in a while.
That is true. That is very, very true. You all really held the fort down, and he was really counting on Georgia to be the place where he could mount his, not just insurrection, but basically a coup. And you all fought back. But you became really known to so many people when we thought you were going to be invited to the Democratic National Convention to be a speaker. For those that don't know, can you give just that quick context for folks?
Totally. So, you know, as a Georgia State Representative, I'm not in Congress. My district is right here in Georgia. We stay in Georgia. We don't travel anywhere for session outside of Atlanta. And I had gone to Chicago for an Arab American Institute panel, ironically titled "Voices You Will Not Hear at the DNC." And it was meant to just talk about, you know, diverse voices that don't tend to make it on those national stages, but just as a reminder of what we're seeing coming out of Gaza, talking mostly with Palestinians and Arabs impacted. And it was Abbas Alawiya from the Uncommitted movement that mentioned my name publicly for the first time that Tuesday. It was actually the day of my panel. And they'd been in negotiations for a couple of months with the DNC about policy, about speakers, just the whole 9 yards, because they had secured 30 delegates, which is incredible. And the long story short of it is that, you know, my name became public, and then, you know, they were still in negotiations, and then we got the no, and I ended up joining the very unplanned sit-in, specifically when I saw Jeff Duncan, our lieutenant governor, on that stage. And, you know, to think that somebody who is an anti-choice Republican, one of the last things he ever did was pass a really awful anti-trans bill where he silenced one of his own colleagues in the chamber who has a trans child to pass. It was literally the last thing he ever did. And to see that man on the stage, I remember thinking, you know what? I guess I'm joining a sit-in today. So.
Wow. Help me understand how the Democratic Party could fumble. And I don't want you to speak for the party itself, but just how you think about this, right? I mean, they had an opportunity where Vice President Kamala Harris was being looked at as a kind of uh, a bright spot of possibility, right? That Biden was hawkish on Gaza. He was supporting a genocide. Kamala Harris didn't meet with Netanyahu. We were looking for any just crevice of hope that she was going to be different. And then the protesters came out and she said, I'm speaking. And she made them sound like they were Trump supporters just because they had the audacity to speak out against the genocide. And more and more evidence came out that made it very clear that, I don't know, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden ain't no different on this issue. And the same voters who were starting to get energized were getting a little disappointed. And people said, why not just let a Palestinian-American on that stage?
You know, if I had an answer to that question, I think this conversation would be going very differently. The reality of the situation, and you know, something I've learned as an elected official, there's a lot I've learned about party and the work that we do, and the breakdown of stakeholders in you know, the duopoly, or however people want to call it. But the specific thing I learned that's been the most eye-opening is that the reason duopolies exist is that these parties are literally thousands of organizations on every level of government: national, state, county, city, you name it. And it's just full of volunteers, frankly, for the most part. Some of these like groups, you know, or organizations are more established than others, like the DLCC, the DNC, they get funding, that kind of thing. And others are a base of volunteers. Like the Gwinnett County Democrats is just a bunch of volunteers, right? Yeah. The Fulton County Democrats are a bunch of young Democrats of Georgia. They're not paid. Even our current chair is an unpaid position, which I think should be full-time and should be changed for infrastructure purposes. But, and so it's hard for me to understand the DNC, because it's kind of one of those things that the higher you go up, the longer it takes for people to catch up almost. It's kind of like, I joke that the DNC is just a party planning committee that shows up every 4 years, and their job is to plan a big party and frankly be a vehicle to, you know, get mail out and ads and, you know, fundraise and whatever. And then they go away again. The people running it aren't the people who've been, you know, they've been either around or had done a lot for the party and then just kind of needed a place to go. And I have really low expectations for the DNC. I was a Bernie kid, you know, that was my first political heartbreak, was 2016. And so I never have expectations. I'll be honest, I never have expectations for the DNC. And so for me, it was kind of like one of two things was going to happen. Either we expose the fact that the party on a federal level is still behind on this issue, and it is from its base. It's very behind. Like anywhere you looked, anyone who went to the convention center, anyone who went to McCormick, whether it's the arena or otherwise, because there were two different locations, you couldn't turn a corner without seeing somebody wearing kufiya, ceasefire shirt, had a Palestinian flag, pin. I mean, everyone was just like decked out. It was beautiful. And these are like the hardcore Democrats that are showing up to this. These aren't, you know, people who are kind of like okay with the party, I'm using it as a vehicle kind of thing. No, these were there as delegates, as donors, as party officials. Getting credentials was awful and expensive. I was really lucky. I could find people I could bum it from, but like, I don't know. I just, you know, we either expose that institutionalized racism that still exists, or we get a symbolic gesture. And unfortunately, it was, you know, in the other direction. In terms of how that relates to the Harris campaign, again, I still don't know, right? My assessment is that they're bringing on some really good staff that are more aligned with us on this issue.
What does more aligned mean?
So, for example, her Arab and Muslim liaisons are people that come from the community, right? Like these aren't your typical career folks. Like, you know, Nasrina, for example, used to represent students who were targeted for protesting for Palestine, right? Like these aren't, I don't know how to, like, it's the vibe. I don't know how to explain it. Like there's a vibe about people, and there's a set kind of resume for people who are more career staffers versus those who organize and kind of earn their stripes, for lack of a better word. And so she's like staffing in a different way, right? I think there are folks who, and part of the reason I was cautiously optimistic is, for example, when she is responsible for her own decisions, when she was in the Senate in 2019, she voted no on more weapons to Israel, right? She went from speaking at AIPAC conferences in 2017 to voting no on more weapons. And I'm thinking, okay, this is somebody who can change, somebody who's surrounding herself by better people. And unlike Biden, I don't think she's a zealot on this. And so it was so disappointing that the DNC decided what they did, and that the campaign seems so scared of its own shadow on this. And this is sort of, everyone kept saying that the DNC would be like 1968, but I honestly think the dynamic of this election is what feels more like 1968.
I agree with everything you said in terms of your analysis of who these people are and what they're doing. I think where we probably part is it doesn't give me any hope.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like these people, yeah.
So I want to be clear. I've been doing like a mini TikTok electoral organizing series that I'll sometimes cross post on Instagram when I have time. And something I told people is that I don't put hope or trust in politicians anymore, which is weird because I am one, right? I want us to get out of this perspective of I'm hoping this person does something good. I'm trusting this person does something good. Instead, I want us to get into the habit of recognizing that civic engagement is a constant verb and that our opposition is showing up all the time, right? Our opposition is still sending me emails telling me to stand with Israel to this day. And they just keep doing it. And they're like all over my inbox. I don't know why they're doing it, but they're choosing to do it. And the reality is that, and I'm not saying like emails and phone calls are going to sway me, but my point is that you build a base, you show the fact that you're committed and consistent. And if somebody's at a tipping point, if they're not a firm believer on an issue, who they surround themselves with, or at least who's in their orbit of influence, coupled with the fact that I think we have an unprecedented coalition on Palestine that we've never seen before in the history of this country, the fact that the Democratic base has shifted on this, I'm not putting my hope in a person. I'm putting my hope in a movement that has never been this widespread before.
So with that in mind, do you still believe that the Democratic Party is the best option at the presidential level for that coalition's struggle and resistance to be rewarded?
Yeah, I mean, again, like I'm like 2016 was my biggest heartbreak. And so when people say like Democratic Party, I'm like, okay, what do you mean by that? Right? Because it's so funny.
Well, let me put it more succinctly. There's at least three options, right? You vote Trump, you vote Harris, or you vote third party, right?
Yeah.
I'm saying this partly because I'm a Green Party member and partly just because the Green Party is the only people who have ballot access. So you can vote. Everybody in America could want Cornel West to win. Everybody in America could want Claudette, De La Cruz to win. They literally can't win, not because I don't believe in third party, just the bureaucracy and the law say they can't. Joe Stein could win if everybody voted for it. Yeah. So there's at least three options there that are legally viable. Do you still believe that voting for Kamala Harris is the best option given what we have at our disposal at this juncture in history?
So there's a couple of, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a couple of things before we even have the conversation that I don't think I can concede, which is first and foremost, I actually don't think that there are multiple viable options outside of the two this election cycle. I want to be clear. Like, of course, if everybody voted a certain way, that person wins. But the reality of voting, and what I'm personally learning in my own district, because I'm a down ballot person, right? Like having all these national conversations is just way out of my scope. We don't even have staff. I don't even have a comms person. And I am going to answer the question, but I want to set this up first.
This is night school, so this is not like cable news gotcha. I want you to
flesh it out. No. Like, I want to be clear. Yeah. So I want people to follow me on this, right? So as a state representative, I represent in Georgia about 60,000 people. And we have been door knocking every single week, starting about 5 weeks ago, because that's when the general election really kicks off, and I didn't have a primary. Right. We've knocked over 4,000 doors, and we've spoken. We are really lucky. So a lot of places only have a 10%, 15% open door rate. We got really lucky with a 30% open door rate. And my district has the 5th lowest turnout in the state, 5th lowest. And we threw the kitchen sink at it in 2022. And we're able to increase turnout by 10 percentage points. But the total number of people that voted, I'm pretty sure was 20,000 or something. Actually, way less than that, 12,000 or something. It was a very, very small turnout rate compared to how much work we put in when it came to fundraising and ads and door knocking. And we built the gold standard of a campaign. And you can ask anybody in Georgia that watched what we did in 2022, because I know campaigns. I've been an organizer way longer than I've been an elected official. And I was really lucky that I had a community behind me that said, you know what, just tell us what you need and we'll make it happen. Because I don't know how to fundraise. It's terrifying.
That's the thing.
And the reason I mention this is because when I say there are only 2 viable candidates, I'm specifically talking about the fact there are only 2 candidates that currently have infrastructure, even skeletal, in all 50 states, right? The kind of infrastructure that's required to go talk to people, recruit more volunteers, be sustainable in the long run. And that's why I'm a Working Families Party member, for example. I'm technically part of 2 parties, and why I love the Working Families Party model, because what they do is, instead of focusing on just ballot access, they actually focus on, okay, parties are basically just like clubs and affiliations, right? And if I want to be a viable presidential candidate in X amount of cycles, here's my path, right? It's either going to be through a fusion ballot system where some states will let you be on 2 separate party ballots, or it's going to be, I'm going to sue or figure out how to get on the ballot myself. But in the meantime, I'm going to build a volunteer base that exists outside of election cycles, where they have monthly meetings, where they come to campuses and recruit students. Again, I've been doing this for 10 years. And so based on that analysis, and I know people have gotten mad about me about this, like, it is what it is, I just don't see how me going in another direction in a swing state is going to be helpful. Now, everyone's thinking, okay, how do you apply pressure? How do you break the duopoly? How do you...
I was gonna say, that's the argument. There are people who would argue, yeah, the Green Party can win. Yep. That's why I made it very interesting. That's why I was...
legally viable, yeah.
Yeah, I'm making that very important distinction, right? There are 3 options that you can choose,
correct,
electorally to respond to this genocide.
Yep.
And I would concede that the Green Party is not going, that Jill Stein is not going to be president in any...
Yep.
But that fact alone doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't vote for Jill.
So here's where my next point comes in. Yeah. So if you want to apply pressure, particularly on Democrats, you got to win primaries. I know people think that if they punish Democrats, it's going to force them to recalibrate. And as much as I wish that people had that kind of like awareness of the world, what it does is it shifts them right. We've seen this in 2000, we've seen this in 2008, and we saw this in 2016. As much as I wish, and I'm telling you this as somebody who, again, first political heartbreak was Bernie, as much as I wish that that kind of thinking shifted my colleagues left instead of right, I would immediately be like, you know what? Let's go, everybody. Like, this is a direction we're taking. But the reality is that's not how it works. If you want to send a serious message to a party about which direction you want to move them, you do it in the primaries. And here's how I know this, because that's what Republicans do. That's what the GOP does. That's what AIPAC does. AIPAC has never, if you look in all of its history, it has never primaried or punished a candidate or held them accountable without ensuring, on the flip side of it, that they can ensure the person replacing them is better on their issue. If they can't ensure the person replacing them is better on the issue, they don't engage. Even if that person is super pro-Israel, like in a very like way that they want them to be or not, like if they have 2 people who are primarying each other and they know one of them is the incumbent and one is like, you know, slightly less pro-Israel than the other, but the other person is going to lose, right? And they're going to end up with someone even worse in the general, they're not even going to get involved. Because for them, they recognize that I will never concede an inch that I've won moving forward, ever. And I think sometimes we think...
Let me push back on that just a little bit. The difference would be, in all those circumstances, they would never allow a candidate to emerge, though, who didn't believe that Israel should exist. They would never allow a candidate to emerge that would fundamentally disrupt the broader project.
What do you mean emerge from where? Like on a presidential level?
Yeah. So for example, if they might primary, because your point is they'll primary somebody, but they're not going to disrupt the incumbent just to lose the general to somebody. Yep.
Worse on their issue. Yeah.
But in that hypothetical, the incumbent that they're letting live,
totally,
is still close. It still supports Zionism.
Yeah.
Right. They just might be a soft Zionist.
But I'm saying in a specific race where AIPAC gets involved, right? But
I'm with you. But here's my point. In the case of the third party, the difference is the reason why third party candidates don't have that luxury is because all the candidates aren't just better or worse on the issue. They fundamentally believe in a system that is the exact opposite of what they need. So if, for example, no one would say vote third party if Kamala Harris, was saying, look, I'll have a weapons embargo And yeah, I think Israel has a right to exist, which some other people may disagree with as an ethno state. And they might say, yeah, well, Kamala Harris, she's not going to send any more weapons. And while she still says that, she wants to have a relationship with Netanyahu, she's going to work toward a legitimate state for the Palestinian people. I think a lot of people wouldn't vote third party. But the fact of the matter is, Democrats are a Zionist party, Republicans are a Zionist party. And so people feel like they don't have the luxury of having the kind of incremental or the tactical or the strategic tinkering that AIPAC. You have to go outside the Democrats.
So to be clear, that is where the tension of this entire conversation sits, right? It's the urgency of now versus the long-term strategy. And I think people forget, for example, the Democrats used to have another force in their primaries, the NRA, and we kicked them out of the party, right? And I'm telling you, as somebody who's been doing this for a long time, if you look at the trajectory of Democrats holistically, right, just on numbers alone, we now have more people than ever voting against weapons to Israel, including, again, the vice president herself in 2019. We have more people than ever signing on to statements like, and again, this is actually a perfect proof point for this. So Representative Adam Smith in Washington right now is being primaried. So they have like a primary system where 2 Democrats can move forward into the general. And a Muslim woman is running against him on Palestine, the fact that he took like AIPAC money and whatever. And he is currently leading a letter that got signed by 120 something Democrats demanding an investigation into Aisha Noor's killing. And he wouldn't have done that if his opposition was only a Republican, and that he would be moving right on that issue. And so when I talk about, for example, this being a vehicle, it's because the base is already there, right? Like volunteers, the other affiliation groups like Young Democrats, College Democrats, the pillars, I guess, that make up the Democratic Party, right? Like unions, progressive organizations, Black organizations, Hispanic organizations, progressive reproductive organizations, all of those. And the younger organizations, the Gen Z organizations, the climate organizations are now consistently pro-Palestine. You don't see as much of the conversation about progressive but for Palestine anymore. At least I've seen it kind of mostly disappear over the past 11 months because it's really kind of exposed the inconsistency between those two positions. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, there seems to be a tipping point here, a tipping point that we've been building for a long time. And it doesn't mean you stop the work anywhere else. Like, I think that's the other piece here. I don't think these are mutually exclusive things. I think that for me, I don't see how you can build a third party like with this kind of cyclical thinking of like, okay, we're only going to take advantage of this, we're only going to take advantage of that, which is why I like the Working Families Party model a lot more. And there's pros and cons in both models, right? You're going to have, for example, some people might say, well, the Working Families Party is still within the Democrats, blah, blah, blah. But the reality is that Democrats are multiple parties. You've got DSA, you've got Working Families Party, you've got independents. That's just the reality of who we caucus with. We're the closest thing to a coalitional government in the country right now. At the same time, if you want to keep those individuals accountable, it's not, and this is the part that I wish we could build on, whether it's volunteer-based, whether it's infrastructure-based, whether it's whatever. And part of the reason why I don't want to siphon off our limited time, energy, and resources into that endeavor is because we can currently right now pressure people who are becoming way more sympathetic to our cause. And they're ready. They're primed for it. They've been seeing this for 11 months. The way this has shifted nationally, I've never seen it before in my life. But the thing is, DC is such a tight bubble that it is the last to break. It just is. It is. And especially when it comes to international affairs. And here's why. What people don't realize is that our elected officials get intelligence briefings that only certain people with a certain clearance have access to. So instead of the whole office getting to debate an issue, suddenly it's just the member and a specific staffer or maybe a few of them. So already the opinions on this are so much smaller. And what did we do? I literally, personally, myself, facilitated conversations between our senators and Palestinian families that were able to directly contradict intelligence reports, because our intelligence sources rely on Israeli intelligence sources. And suddenly the conversation started to change with them. Suddenly we went from refusing to even say the word ceasefire to leading a letter that 24 other members signed. And it took the number of senators calling for a ceasefire from 4 to 29. And it's that kind of momentum that we keep forgetting about like, how do you pressure people from the left? How do you hold them accountable? How do you do whatever? I think protesting in the streets and mobilization is super crucial from every perspective, whether it's raising awareness, agitation, etc. But we also need to remember that if you're not in somebody's face, they can ignore you and forget about you. And that's sort of the part that I'm trying to connect as a legislator. And so to your original question about like third party or whatever, to me, if I thought that there was the infrastructure to turn out enough voters to be able to make it happen, I would not be having this conversation, right? I would not even be considering voting the way I'm considering voting come November. But again, I offered my endorsement to the campaign, and now I don't even know if they want it, right? Like, that's the tension.
Well, they definitely don't want it.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, look, here's the thing, okay? This is like the weird part, right? Everyone I talk to is like, of course we want your endorsement, like, but I'm like, okay, can I talk to somebody who's like a decision maker? And this is where the sort of national stuff and the local stuff, there's like a disconnect there, because again, it just takes time for things to filter up. It takes time for you to move stuff. Here's the other fact for y'all. In Georgia, 2/3 of the House Democratic Caucus refused to vote for a bill that conflated criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. And they're all Democrats, right? In the South, in Georgia, like in our...
No surprise, but still frustrating.
But it's moving, right? It's moving. It's like the party base, local leadership, and even some statewide leadership, and even some national leadership have moved. So why would I concede all of that to AIPAC, leave the field wide open for them without even any opposition within the party that we're already making inroads with, and turn around and go, I'm going to start all over somewhere else? Because to me, I just see it as and some people might see it as like a futile attempt at change or whatever. But I just history kind of tells us that's not the case, right? Like, history shows us that there have been these tipping points in our history, right? With parties, with people, with movements, with organizations that have come around eventually. It's always been a no until it wasn't. It's always been, this is the way it is, until it wasn't. And it's the lane I inhabit, right? It's okay if people disagree. It's okay if they've chosen a different lane to do this. But right now I have seen multiple wins that lead me to consider that this might be the best path forward. That's all. And I think organizing under Trump, frankly, I'm gonna be really honest with y'all, I'm not gonna have time to even think about Palestine under Trump in a Republican-led state. That's just basic knowledge.
Say more about what you mean by that.
Sure. So in 2017, when the Muslim ban was first brought down, all we did was defense. We never did any offensive work. We never did any work to move anybody left. We just physically, and when I say I worked for CARE Georgia at the time, nobody, not a single organization, not one, had capacity to talk about anything but defensive positions related to their respective groups they're advocating on behalf of, right? So immigration groups could only focus on immigration here at home and on the defensive. Muslim groups could only focus on predominantly issues here and on the defensive. There was no opportunity to push Trump left. It wasn't even an opening to push. It was literally let's prevent us from falling even further into this like hole that we continue to dig ourselves into. And if Trump is elected, and I'm really not trying to like abdicate more responsibility under a Trump presidency, I'm just being very honest. The constituent asks that I'm going to be getting, the frantic phone calls that I'm going to be getting, the demands of my constituents are going to be so overwhelming. I'm physically not going to have enough time to do anything on offensive, and I'm going to be defensive the whole time. Because here's the thing. When Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem, which again, symbolic, but I'll tell you this, when I spoke to Palestinians, they literally said that was the most spirit-breaking moment that they had lived through. Because there's a difference between breaking people's bodies and breaking people's spirits. And the thing that really got to them was like, sure, some people protested. Sure, there was some kind of mobilization, but it wasn't this massive of a coalition. It wasn't this much organizational support because people didn't have capacity. Period. End of story. Right now, a lot of progressive organizations that could be mobilizing, for example, to support Bernie Sanders' joint resolution in Congress are so busy trying to just turn voters out and stop a Trump presidency that they just don't have physically, just people have X amount of hours in the day and they have an obligation to turn out these voters. They physically don't have time to do any of their typical policy work. We all have limited time, talent, and treasure. And under a Trump presidency, and again, because I've lived it, I worked for Care Georgia. I was on the front lines. I promise you, I'm not exaggerating. I'm not trying to fearmonger people. I'm just telling you from a specifically structural and tactical perspective, we are going to shift into such a defensive position that we're not going to even have time to think about over there, let alone over here. And here's my final point on that. What I tell people is this: when I think about who I want to vote for, I never assume that I'm going to have a candidate who's going to do everything I want them to do. I'm not going to do everything somebody wants me to do. I'm a human being. These are all human beings. But what I do think about is who is around them, who is their sphere of influence, who is the base of their, mobilization. And the other question I ask myself is this: who can I mobilize under the best? Because I can either be under somebody who opposes me on all 15 of my issues that I really care about, or somebody who opposes me on only 3 of my issues that I care about, that I can then spend time mobilizing on the offensive on, because I'm not on the defensive with those 15 things. They're going to take away all of my time, energy, and treasure. And that is just how my brain works. I know that's not how everyone's brain works. I know that some people view voting as like a moral moment in time. I just don't see it as a permanent contract. And I don't see it as a finality to a conversation. I actually see it as the beginning of one.
There are people, I'll be honest with you, in the chat here who are not buying what you're saying.
Totally. Oh, I can't. Oh, I just saw this. Sorry.
Actually, I want to say in this audience, the majority.
Yeah, totally.
One of my frustrations is that people assume that people with whom they disagree are operating in bad faith, or that they're right. Totally. Every day I'm a shill for somebody.
Yep. Yep.
I'm always fascinated by it. I'm like, I don't even like those people. Those people hate me. So I don't assume you operate in bad faith. I feel confident saying that you're sincere in your approach. What do you say to the people? So I'm not going to question your sincerity on this.
Yeah, totally. No, it's fine.
But what I do want to do is ask more. Like, there are people here who are saying, like, literally, someone said, "Where's your dignity?" People are saying that the Democrats have literally, not only are they underwriting the genocide of your people, but they literally won't let you on the stage. How could you possibly want to be a part of a party that would do that? How could you possibly stand with them when they won't stand with you in the most basic and minimal ways imaginable?
Yeah. So again, the DNC is just one. Again, it's a national institution, but it's just one institution in this party. And again, it's not the only party I belong to. I also belong to the Working Families Party, and I think it's getting like absolutely absurd for people to question my dignity, because I actually find a lot of dignity in being able to, at bare minimum, try to maneuver in the midst of a genocide as best as you can. Like, I think there's actually a lot of dignity in being like, you know what, I'm not going to let this break me, and I'm going to do all that I can with the little power that I have as a state representative to punch up as much as possible. And so, like, thing number one, I think people throw phrases around like, oh, you don't have any dignity, you're bringing shame on the Palestinian people, whatever. And I want to just point out that Palestinians are not a monolith. And not only are they not a monolith, that kind of language, for lack of a better word, is actually polarizing people like my family straight back to the Democrats. Like, it is like insane to me the way that my family has responded, for example, to seeing some of these comments about me, because we never agree on anything. Like, I'm gonna be real honest with you. The fact that like my parents understand what I'm doing right now is just blows my mind. But you know what I'm talking about. I mean,
totally.
Like it's family, right? Like, you're not supposed to agree, and it's just weird to me. But the other thing that's really fascinating to me about that is that, like, why does a disagreement on strat? Because I think that I can also make the argument, and I don't want to, because I really don't want to get into this argument about like Greens and whatever, because when you say things like, oh, that's just the Working Families talking point crap, whatever, the Working Families Party just unseated the Delaware Speaker of the House, who's a Democrat, who was very pro-Israel, had been an incumbent for 20 years, and they were able to unseat her. You're telling me it doesn't matter that the next set of expected leadership are people who are way more sympathetic to Palestinians in the president's home state, and including advocates like Representative Medina, who like has been doing this work? You're telling me it doesn't matter that we got rid of somebody like that to replace her with like new leadership, and that way somebody like Medina is no longer sidelined and is actually part of leadership? That stuff to me matters. And like the idea that people think that we're somehow taking, what is it? That doing it this way means you're voting for genocide is like awful, right? It's genuinely awful because I need someone to show me.
Let's unpack that, because that is and again, I hate that talking point.
Yeah.
I think it's fair to say someone is making a choice that is wrong, and as a consequence of their wrong choice, they are worsening a genocide or intensifying a genocide.
Yep.
But I don't want to hang the genocide on we're all trying to resist the genocide, and we all have different tactics and strategies for how to arrive there.
Yep.
Right. I've heard very credible people make the case that that the genocide under Donald Trump will just be worse, right? And that there's no material benefit to saying, Trump or Harris, or rather Harris over Trump. I'm sorry, Trump over Harris on this issue, right? If you concede that the Greens can't win, this isn't my position necessarily. I'm saying this is what people are saying. That some are saying, look, Kamala can beat Trump, Green Party can't. So if Trump wins, things are actually going to be worse in Palestine. They're going to be worse in the West Bank. They're going to be worse in Gaza. They're going to be worse in the Golan Line, etc. Then there are other people who say the differences are so incrementally are so minimal that at least if you're going to catch hell, at least if the Democrats swing and miss this badly, if they lose this issue and it's very clear that you lost this issue because you wouldn't stop a genocide, they're now going to be forced to take a different position. You're going to have it's better than primarying them, right? So those are the two positions. I don't think I don't want to say either person, even if I disagree with one of those positions, I'm not going to say the other person is supporting the genocide or wants the genocide. Someone here says you take the genocide too lightly.
Yep.
I suspect that person's not Palestinian, so I find that sort of repugnant to say. But and then there are people who are saying, like, it's not personal, they're just questioning the rhetoric.
Totally.
So, this is about stopping the slaughter and expansion into the West Bank. These are all reasonable points. How do you make sense of it? How do you talk about it? How do you think about it? People are saying, look, we need to stop this genocide. And I'm going to add one more sprinkle to it. There's the moral question. Some people say it's just immoral to vote for anybody who supports a genocide. If there were if Kamala Harris right now, and I asked this to someone who didn't give me a straight answer, but if Kamala Harris right now were to say, I don't believe gay people should get married. If Kamala Harris right now were to say, I just don't think black people are as smart as white people, no one would be telling us to vote for her, even if despite that, Trump is still worse. Yeah. They'd say that there is a moral non-starter there that we have to have as human beings. Why is genocide in Gaza not a moral non-starter? So maybe start there and then. Because,
how do I explain this? I think it's the difference between people viewing only their actions as what we're deciding on morality, right? So if the thing that I'm only considering is what I am going to do, it makes total sense. You're going to be like, what I am going to do, whether like it's going to be moral or not, and that's where you end your analysis. Right. But if your analysis includes both what you're going to do and the consequences of what you're doing, I think that analysis gets way more complicated and way different. And based on that foundational, because I think that is the foundational difference when people are having this conversation. I don't view my vote as just the action I'm taking. I view my vote and the consequences of that vote. That is how I determine the morality of what. So
you don't see your individual vote as a referendum on your moral position. You don't see it as an articulation of your moral position.
And that's what I was saying earlier. I actually don't view voting as a finality and a moral contract. I actually view it as something you just check off and do in a system that you're moving pieces around to build the best situation possible for you to organize. That is how I have always viewed voting. That's it. And the reality, and like, thank you. Sorry, I'm like not used to this, so I don't know where.
I'm sorry. I don't want to distract with the comments.
No, you're fine. But this comment from like Wanda, I think is really important because the entire point is that elections are not the only path to ending this genocide. And the reality is that elections have a specific timeline that doesn't change based on world events, at least in the US. In other countries, they can, call for an election and all that kind of stuff. That to me shows that elections are not the only place to create change. And that there are multiple lanes to forcing that change to happen, right? We have divestment campaigns. We have different kinds of pressure tactics. The lane I inhabit is politics, right? It does not, it's kind of hard because I'm always trying to balance being a human being and like having these emotions. And at the same time, like I am a Palestinian. There's no, like no one, like there are rules for other people, right? People who've set precedents, who've described how to do this, who have kind of built a playbook. There's no playbook on being the only elected Palestinian in a red state, because again, I am actually the only elected Palestinian currently who is in a state that is controlled in all three branches by Republicans. The only one. That changes everything that I think about. I literally, before we came on, I told you I graduated from the same high school as Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Which is wild to me.
Which is insane. My starting point is so different than most people's starting points. My starting point and my reality in a state like Georgia is so different. And so when people tell me, oh, you're only chasing breadcrumbs, I'm sorry. But if a decision I make is going to ensure that I save even one person's life, I don't care if that's instrumental. Particularly because if the other choice, the other expected option is not only not going to do that, but they're going to make it worse. And I hate it. Do you think, and I want to be clear, if it was Biden at the top of that ticket and everybody knew this, I was like, absolutely not. It's never going to happen.
Well, what's the difference?
Correct. And this is the part where
I was with you up until that point. I followed the logic, but there's no material difference between the two.
And that's where I disagree with you. And again, I know people don't agree with that. And I hate being the person to have to make this case because I think the campaign should be making this case for her. But the reality of the situation is that Biden was known as an empathetic person. That was his like big appeal to so many people, particularly post-COVID when people were mourning and everything was terrible. He has a massive empathy gap when it comes to Palestinians. He is, and I mean this sincerely, is racist against Palestinians and probably Arabs at large.
He's a Zionist. I mean, he literally says I'm a Zionist. That by definition.
But hold on a second. There are people who are like, I'm a Zionist because they don't really understand what that means. They don't care and they just want to score some political points. And I promise you, I have talked to elected officials who said, I don't care about this issue. I don't think about it. It's not personal to me. But my constituents are in my office once a month or once a quarter showing up to my town halls. And since they're showing up to my town halls and they're asking for this, I'm going to do what they're asking me to do. They just don't care. As much as I wish it was AIPAC money, as much as I wish that there's like a straight like dollar for dollar avenue you can take, this would be a very different conversation. So just inherently on their thinking about people, which I think matters, I think that an elected official, how they think and what they think plays a part in their eventual decision making. And I just have not seen that from Harris. I really haven't. I haven't seen that same racism. And I know people are like, well, she repeated this point or this point or this talking point. But my point is that when it comes to her actual actions, she was the only one to call Wadia's family, even though the president said he did. It took him a while to actually call them. She is the only one to call Hani, who is doing a ton of UNRWA work in northern Gaza and has been a part of that, right? And people are like, well, she should have resigned. Okay, let's go through that. Let's say she does resign. Who replaces her? Johnson replaces her. A Republican gets to literally decide who the next vice president is because that goes through the House, not through the Senate.
Yeah.
And so she's been this is based on people who have been doing this work. I want to be very clear. This is like very inside baseball. This is not like things you can put into an ad because it's very technical and it's very annoying. But and it's not just phone calls, right? She was the person pushing for the humanitarian aid piece. She was the first person to kind of break that wall on calling for a ceasefire. I
mean,
no. Sorry, on a federal level, at that level, like I want to be clear, like she's the one who kind of.
I know what you mean, but I'm saying even that was it wasn't a permanent ceasefire.
She walked it back because the White House is yelling at everybody, and that's the part that drives me.
I just want to make her sound like a profiling courage here.
No. I want to be clear. You asked me the distinction between her and Biden. I'm not saying it's a profile on courage.
Fair enough.
You're not going to see me be like, Harris is going to free Palestine. Like, that's not the argument I'm making right now. Yeah. I was asked specifically, how is she different than Biden? So first and foremost, on whether one is racist or not, that's on just those points alone, there is a difference that there is no empathy gap there. Period. That's it, right? Point number one. Point number two on policy. We have never had a presidential candidate with a mixed record on Israel before. I'm not saying it's a good record. I'm saying it's a mixed record on Israel before. She has a voting record on this. So again, one of her last votes in 20, and I'm telling you this, like, it shows me she's amenable to being pressured, right? The fact that she went from speaking at an AIPAC conference in 2017 to voting, being one of, I think it was like 19 senators in 2019 to voting no on weapons to Israel, that shows me a trajectory that could be worked with. If it didn't, if she was like Biden, for example, who's never shown that kind of trajectory, I'd be like, cool, same as Biden, we're done, right? The question was, how is she different than Biden? That is my explanation of how she's different than Biden. The thing that's driving me crazy is that so you know how when you ask somebody a question or when you talk to somebody and you give them a case and they start to not only give you the answer to that case, but then an explanation of what they're thinking about, like how they're thinking about it, right? Like their logic of it.
Yeah.
There was a moment where I had an opportunity to ask her about this, and the logic she leveraged mimicked the same logic that I've heard in our spaces as it relates to de-escalation, stopping the bombs, whatever the case may be. I don't want to be like, let me share these details with you because I don't want to be the person that like quote unquote breaks the news. So I've very purposely chosen not to talk about it because I don't want to be the surrogate. I don't want to be the person that takes this on. The campaign needs to share this themselves. But there is a difference in the way they're approaching this. And last but not least, who she's hiring. And I'm not just talking about, her liaisons to the community. There have been several times now where she has decided on like a foreign policy advisor, not Phil Gordon, but like other people, right? People who write policy, people who do whatever, where AIPAC is like condemning the decision, right? When somebody like Netanyahu's like, no, I don't, he was fine with Biden, but doesn't want Harris. Like, people might think this isn't good enough. Fine with me. If you think, and again, I want to be clear, if you think that none of this matters and it's not good enough and whatever, by all means do what you want to do.
You're saying what's your conscience. You're not advocating for Kamala per se. You're simply saying you think it's the most pragmatic decision that you can make.
I am simply laying out my strategic and tactical thinking on this issue as it relates to how is she different than Biden, that she has a voting record that I can point to that's at least at best ambiguous, that she has had recent actions that at best are frankly contradictory, right? Like she went to the National Black Journalists Convention, National Black Association.
NABJ, yep, National Association of Black Journalists.
Thank you. Sorry. It's like I'm tired now. But and it was interesting because you can tell there was a point where they asked her about this and she was like trying to figure out how to say this and said, well, I supported when the president stopped the weapons shipments. And it's like, okay, like to me, I'm like, okay, well, what does that mean? And I've been asking, like, I'll be honest with you, I work with members of Congress to like try to get families out and stuff. And something staff keep telling me is, because I'm like, guys, I need you to be more vocal. This is an election year. The public needs to hear from you. And the thing I keep getting back is that the White House is telling people, well, if you're more vocal, you're going to mess up your ability to get this person out or get polio vaccines in or XYZ. And they're threatening. These peace negotiations aren't happening. Netanyahu's made it clear they're not happening. At least
that's why it all feels like vibes. It's like she's telling some people behind the things promises that haven't been made public. The people who are public are being told don't be more public because it can hurt the thing.
Yeah, and it's wild. And nobody wants to catch the car. Nobody.
There's no reason to believe it. To me, when I look at Kamala, and I need to look into this 2019 vote to see what the reason for her not vote. Because sometimes people don't vote because of pork in a bill. There are other things. But I know fundamentally, in 2019, she also visited AIPAC. She gave an AIPAC speech in 2019. I spoke to her personally in 2020, summer of 2019, actually. And then I spoke to her again. That's not true. I spoke to her in summer of 2019 about this issue. That's all I'll say. And I didn't feel like there was a difference. I watched her on the. She didn't run super long, so there wasn't a lot to say. But every moment she seems to be saying the same AIPAC talking points that everyone else in the Democratic Party and Republican Party say. And even this year, even if I were to concede that there's a slight difference between her and Biden on this issue, if you say, I'm always going to fund Israel, I'm always going to make sure Israel has weapons and money, then to me, you're always, and you're always going to believe in Israel's right to defend itself and Israel's right to exist, which really means right to exist as an ethno state. then to me, everything else is just minor details. Now, I share your opinion that that doesn't mean necessarily that the best choice is to vote green or to vote someone other. We still have to be thoughtful and strategic about what it all means. But I couldn't let that. I don't want people to use that as the out. My concern.
No, it's not. Oh, no. The question you asked me specifically is how is she different than Biden? I'm answering the question. My out.
No. I hear you. But what I'm saying is, I'm disputing that. I'm disputing that there is a substantive difference. And so for me, as someone who doesn't believe that there's a substantive difference, I don't want people to use that there's a difference argument as an out. For you, I think you genuinely and with principle believe that there is a difference between the two. And so yeah, that makes sense to me. Let me put it differently. I think it's like a distinction without a difference. It's like he might be racist against Palestinians as he's supporting the genocide. She may cry at night as she supports the genocide. But if both are fundamentally committed as a political position and as a strategic and self-interested position and as a party position to the same system, then I'm not sure that the fact that she feels worse about the lives of Palestinians is matters. So I don't disagree with your assessment. I'm just not sure it matters.
So, and I think this is, and again, people can call me naive and optimistic. That's fine. It actually doesn't offend me, because if I just don't know how you move forward without optimism. I think naivete is a little offensive because I've been doing this for 10 years and I'm not like,
you're not naive. And I call it hope.
It's not hope in her. Like,
yeah, of course not.
It's like the people that I organize with and the people that would be staffers are not your typical career people, right? And for me, the pressure points would be so different under a Harris presidency than they are under a Biden presidency. The coalition that we have built on Palestine is so different than any coalition in the past. Do I think it guarantees anything? No. But I would much rather have a chance than no chance at all. And that's where I come. That's perspective I come from. I'm not saying that there is like to be clear, if there was any path forward that's 100% guaranteed and perfect and morally just, I don't care about being an elected official. Like, I am honored to represent the people that I represent. I have one of the kindest districts literally ever. People open their doors. They're so kind. They've been so understanding of everything that's going on. I haven't gotten, like, of the hundreds of messages that I've gotten about being Palestinian and whatever, I can count on one or two hands the hate mail that I've gotten, even when I was doing national interviews, even when I was doing whatever, even at the Capitol, right? These people were showing up for me. And so and I didn't even want to run for, like, I don't think people understand this. I did not want to run for office. I was kind of forced into it. Like, this is not my forte. I've been an organizer for way longer than I've been elected official for less than 2 years now. I was inaugurated in January of 2023, and I was elected in November of 2022. So I haven't even made it to my 2-year mark of just being elected, let alone
which you will in a moment, and you're gonna get reaelected.
I mean, that's not the point. The point.
I'm just saying that for people. So I want people to organize, come out for you.
But my point is that I've literally yet to see anybody give me a path that is making sense, right? Like, for me, I've seen change happen through this one at the level I'm at that does have eventual impact at the national level. It's long-term, it's strategic. That's not where everyone wants to sit. That's fine. And I'm okay with that. You don't have to sit here with me. I'm not asking you to sit here with me. I'm just asking people to understand why we're sitting where we're sitting. It's not about selling out. I literally am still job hunting. No one's paying me. Nobody's like, coming in and being like, I need you to say XYZ. Especially when Chris Carr, our attorney general, is trying to sue the education department for taking away like student loan, support. The reality of the situation is that I have asked this to so many people and nobody is giving me a clear answer. Somebody give me a path forward. Somebody give me the infrastructure that's being built and show me what it looks like. Show me how the ask that you are asking of me, show me how it works. Because I've seen how primaries work on people. I've seen how sustained pressure campaigns shift elected officials. Not necessarily, I'm not talking about the president. I think one of the worst things Biden did, in addition to facilitating this genocide, is that he completely destroyed people's trust in their ability to cause change, right? He was so immovable on this, completely immovable on this, that in less than 11 months has convinced people that nothing they do is going to change anything, which is absurd. It is beyond absurd to me because I am literally watching it like at so many different levels of government actually change things.
Yeah.
I hate it because I don't want people to give up, and I don't want people to silo themselves into only one path forward. Because I want to be clear, in addition to me going in whatever path I'm going, I'm also making sure that protesters are protected. I literally showed up to Emory University and put my body between Palestinian students or, protesters, students, etc., and police, right? I worked with my colleagues to ensure that the DA did not charge those students in Atlanta because that's where I have the most access to. I couldn't do the same.
I was actually down there for the Emory protests, and I mean that was a very real thing.
It was nuts, right?
Yeah.
Like the reality of the situation is that if I recognize that these are things I have control over, and I recognize that I can shift the people around me enough to have enough of a groundswell to change this, and there's only one person who would be changeable on this based on the coalition I've built, right? Because the coalition we're building doesn't have any pressure points with Trump. We just don't. We don't want to. We don't want to deal with them. But it does have pressure points in this specific party. And I do think there's going to come a day where we're going to start treating AIPAC money the way we treated NRA money. And I really think it's a matter of time. I really, really, really do. The base of the party has shifted on this. That it shifted on this. And again, folks can call me naive, but things have been the way that they are until they weren't. What am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to just pretend that's not going to happen? Like, I don't.
I think that there are people who just believe that both parties are so indebted to certain things, not just Israel, but Israel, corporate money. That there's certain things that are just fundamental to these parties.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's either naive or disingenuous to think that they'll be different. And I hear what you're saying, which is show me a different way out, and I'm happy to take it. And so I think that's the conversation we need to have. Before you go, I want to ask you, because people in the comments are talking about a tension between you and the Green Party. Some people are accusing you of spreading misinformation or disinformation about Jill Stein in particular.
Yeah.
Can you just? I'd like you to set the record straight on that and clarify that for people who are asking.
So here's the thing. I have been aware of this since 2016. And again, like I said, I've laid out my strategic thinking. I've talked about my down ballot work. I've talked about why I think why it works this way, right? It's not just, as much as I wish, for example, that voters, you can have a video go viral and voters are going to do what you want them to do.
Yeah.
Literally, my life would be so much easier. But the reality is let me take you through the way a voter works, and then I'll come to that.
Yeah, please.
We will send a mailer. We will do an ad. We will we'll knock their door, and then we will call them to remind them to go vote. We literally basically build a mini pipeline of let me introduce myself, let me tell you what we're doing. At the doors, like I said, we've knocked 4,000 doors, spoken to over 1,000 people. It ranges from people having no idea what a state representative is to I'm a huge fan, thank you so much. I've seen you advocate, you're awesome. As much as I wish people in the real world were as deeply aware of all of this, I would be you know what, I get it. If I had, for example, gone to a door and here's something really depressing. I have not knocked a single door where somebody mentioned the Green Party. Not one in my district. Not one. I have not.
In fairness, you're in rural Georgia.
No, I'm in the suburbs. I'm in West Gwinnett. So it's
okay. No, you're okay. You're in
minutes from Atlanta, right? These are involved people. These are, whatever. And what really grinded my gears, and I want to be clear, I never went after Stein until she started amplifying in commentary, calling me a sellout for refusing to endorse the Green Party. None of this, I would have never opened my mouth if she specifically from her official accounts was not doing this. And the thing that really got to me, that the part that I drew a red line was there's a difference between somebody being a bad ally and somebody being pro-genocide. There's a canyon difference between those. And when you start to call people, even if they're bad allies, when you start to spread misinformation about them, when you start to spread disinformation about them, that's just something that gets under my skin. Because as somebody who grew up Muslim in the US, the mis and disinformation about us is so prevalent. And I'm really, really sensitive to it. And you know what? You can argue with somebody. You can tell them that, I disagree with your strategy. I think you need to stop coming after us. I think you should just if you don't believe in what we're doing, then you do your lane, I do my lane. That's my perspective. But the moment I am a state representative, you are a presidential candidate. Why are you liking comments calling me a sellout before I've even ever mentioned you? Right? And on top of that, you're also now referring to other elected officials as pro-genocide. That is the problem. That is the problem with me. And no, I didn't spread misinformation. I am being very clear. There's a canyon difference between being a bad ally or maybe a not good enough ally and being pro-genocide. And I think when you start labeling people pro-genocide who are not pro-genocide, you cheapen the term. You make it difficult for people to recognize what is and is not actually pro-genocide. And to me personally, if you're going to use an issue where my family is in danger, because I still have cousins and stuff in the West Bank, right? My family in Jordan, do people not realize that Jordan could be destabilized? That's where most of my family lives. For us, literally, one, I've never said she's a Russian asset. I said that when it comes to local candidates, because I see this comment right here.
Yeah, this is one of the people who's asking. Yeah. I've been asking for specific, so they provide.
So here's the crazy part where it's she spread lies about Jill running every 4 years. Somebody said, because I said, she wasn't around in 2020, and somebody was she retired. I'm like, okay, cool. I'll correct my math and we'll go, because I was like, she's been running for 12 years. Somebody was she retired. I'm like, okay, cool. I'll correct my math. And then when I corrected my math, they're like, no, she's been doing this work consistently forever. And I'm like, okay, but which
they're basically just saying she didn't run 4 years ago. She ran now. She ran 8 years ago. She ran 12 years ago. Yeah.
But what I'm saying is
that seemed more like a minor gotcha to me than
100%. I'm like, look, fine. I don't care. Whatever. You know what? We can go back to when she ran for governor of Massachusetts, right? We can if we want to add numbers, we can even say it's been 20 years, 18 years. I don't really care. When it comes to local candidates, the Green Party did a thread where about all the local candidates that she has supported in the past. And when I talk about running local candidates, when somebody runs a local candidate, they are running a campaign for them, right? This is something even Democrats are bad about. I want to be clear.
So you weren't saying that the Green Party doesn't run local candidates. You were saying Jill Stein doesn't run.
Nope. And I said, if you want to build infrastructure, they have to be running consistently with a volunteer base. I think this is also the part where I assume too badly that that sometimes the stuff that I'm really it's second nature to me isn't for everybody else, right?
In fairness, I didn't hear you say that either. What I thought you were saying was the Green Party doesn't run local candidates. And that didn't seem like misinformation.
No. What I was specifically saying was that the infrastructure isn't there. The Green Party has been in Georgia longer than DSA. And I actually know DSA volunteers, right? I've never been approached until I was
there are Georgia Green Party members in office right now in Georgia.
I haven't heard from them.
So that's what I'm saying. I think you're wrong on that one.
I've been here, but my point is, Mark, the political world is actually really small, even within parties. And for me, I'm telling you, as someone who's been in Georgia with people, if you knocked on people's doors right now, they are not going to know. They just don't. They don't this is the part where I talk about the fact that, and this is my concern, is that, and this is where people are like, you're spreading misinformation. No, I'm not. Our metrics differ. Our metrics for what I think is sustainable growth and sustainable strategic base building is different. Because for me, it's, do you have a volunteer base that's around consistently? And again, I'll point back to Working Families Party. Working Families Party hosts monthly meetings, just virtual Zoom meetings, but they do them monthly and they don't stop when it's not election cycles. They don't. When it comes to even running local candidates, and when I say running actually local candidates consistently, I'm not talking about just city and municipal and state board and county. I'm talking about state legislature. That is my local stuff. That is where I sit. That is the thing that I know the most about.
Okay.
From my understanding, I have not seen any that kind of local base. And again, I should have clarified, my bad. When I'm talking about local, I'm talking about my level of experience. But again, 20 years in the state of Georgia. DSA has been around for, I think, 8. Working Families Party has been around for around that time as well. Working Families Party now has 6 members in the Georgia state legislature. DSA is about to have 1.
Now, again, the counter to that is, because the Working Families Party works within the Democratic Party, so they're just Democrats getting elected.
Sure.
They might be more progressive Democrats, and some would say that's the strategy.
But right? on a state level, to run as an independent candidate, I actually looked this up. It's actually not that hard on a state level, not statewide, but state district level, because you just get petition signatures. And you can do that with.
But if you're writing a Democratic platform and using a Democratic name, that obviously does make it easier. And I guess the whole point is the Working Family Party wins because they're just Democrats by another name.
And how do you get to that point? So Working Families Party, for example, in New York, and I want to say Pennsylvania, I got to check. I'm not 100% sure.
Right. Philadelphia in particular.
People compete to be on their ballot line.
Yeah.
Right? They're not competing to be on the Democratic line. They're competing to be on the Working Families Party ballot line. You can do that, but it takes time. And this is what I'm saying when I say you build a base, you build a volunteer, because your volunteer base, if they're around consistently, they become your mouthpieces. They start to talk to people organically. Like this isn't meant to be a gotcha. This is me trying to explain to people, you want to break the duopoly? I'm trying to lay out a map for you. I'm literally trying to lay out a map for you. But to tell me that I'm spreading misinformation about, again, this is a nationwide political figure. I am a state representative. Like, why are you coming for me before I even said anything about you? And then the one time I was like, hey, don't use our cause to malign people who, even if they're bad allies, have done what I asked them, which is sign Cori Bush's resolution, call for a ceasefire, call for weapons embargo, make a speech calling it a genocide on the House floor. Again, it's like, that's been my frustration, is that I see what we're doing on a local level, and I see people growing their bases and changing opinions on a local level as they door knock, as they call people, as they set up events. I don't know. That's where I sit. I sit on local stuff, and I see how to build things locally. And I see that if you have, and here's the other piece about having elected local officials, by the way, they become your vehicles to collecting petitions. They become your vehicles to talking to voters. They become your vehicles to anchoring your base. I mean, that's just how it works. And again, I'm not discounting the structural barriers to entry for third parties. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is, here's a blueprint. Take it or leave it. That's on you. I'm literally trying to offer some like free advice that I've gained from doing this for 10 years and talking to people for 10 years. That's all.
Fair enough. Ruwa, I want to say again as we close, thank you for the work that you do. I actually generally agree with your position on this stuff, but even in the spaces where I don't, I think you're sincere and principled and committed. And I don't. There are people who aren't. There are people who will say whatever they can to get to the next job. Some people are bucking to get into the U.S. Congress. Some are taking money. Some are just want to be on TV. I haven't gotten that from you at all.
I mean, real talk. I wrote a resignation letter in December. I agreed to run for office on a state level because I didn't think I would have to lead on this issue because my grandfather had just died. He's the person I was closest to. I've now lost 3 of my grandparents. I do not, as weird as it sounds, I didn't ever expect to have to lead on this on the level that I'm leading on this. That's all.
I get it. Well, thank you for coming on. I appreciate you. I appreciate your commitment. The reason I referenced earlier that you're going up for re-election again, or that your campaign is still going, because there are people who want to support you, and I want people to know that it matters. If you're in Georgia, vote. If you're in her district, vote. If you're eligible to register, and then vote. If you want to support
by October 7th. You can't register after that. Yeah.
So you got about 10 days, 12 days, something like that.
And check it now. Even if you're registered, the Republicans created a public page where somebody can go in and cancel your voter registration without you knowing.
Oh yeah, we reported that here, which I thought was the wildest thing ever. It's certainly not happening. It's happening in very particular populations, and the people doing it in a very particular population. Yep. So please check your registration status. Make sure you're registered. Make sure you vote. If people want to support the campaign or donate to the campaign, you can find that online.
Yeah.
Please support her. Bro, thanks for joining me. I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, thanks. I can't wait to connect again.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Everybody, that was Ruwa Romman. Some of y'all, man, I got to say, again, I understand the critical analysis, but I don't assume that everybody who has a different position or a more moderate position is a shill or is operating at a bad faith. I think that makes it challenging. I'm not telling y'all what to say or what to think. You have every right to free speech. This is an open space. I'm just disagreeing. I'm saying I think some of us are being too hard on these people, on some of these people. I mean, there are shills, right? There are people who walk. I mean, Richie Torres, I don't say, oh, Richie Torres just got it wrong. No, Richie Torres is clearly operating in an unprincipled fashion. And then there are people who just think tactically that voting third party isn't the right answer. And I think there's a principle. Angela Davis just said that today. Are we going to say now Angela Davis is a shill? Angela Davis is a sellout? Like, no, Angela Davis is just has a different take on it than some of us. I'd love to see her all join the Green Party. I'd love to see Angela stand, be with the Green Party. They're not. And even at moments where I disagree with a particular tactical choice from whoever, again, I'm just saying, like, let's look at their full body work. Let's look at their commitment. Let's look at the people that know them. Let's look at the consistency of their choices, even if we disagree. And I think we might arrive in a different place. That's all. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk about something else. Stay with me. Welcome back to Night School. While we were doing the last interview, we had breaking news come in. I want to make sure that everybody knows the breaking news. In the meantime, hit the hit the like button. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Also go to Instagram and hit the follow button for a Night School MLH. I want everybody who's part of the classroom, who's part of the family, to make sure that you register your name and your voice by joining the channel, subscribing to the channel, sharing the content, etc. But anyway, on to the breaking news. Breaking news, Eric Adams has been indicted. That's right. In case you didn't know, the man's been getting watched for a long time. His name is Eric L. Adams. He's a retired police captain who was elected as New York City's 110th mayor almost 3 years ago. Ironically, he did so on a promise of cleaning up the city, getting rid of corruption, getting the criminals off the streets. And it turns out he is part of a federal corruption investigation. Now, this is no surprise to me. If you remember 6 months ago or 8 months ago, there was a bishop. They called him Bishop Bling. Who came on my Griot platform almost a year ago, actually, and came on some other platforms, including right here at Night School. And he said, in maintaining his innocence, that there were people who were trying to get him to turn on Eric Adams. There were informants who were trying to get Eric Adams locked up. I don't know what's true and what's not true, but I knew then that they were on Eric Adams behind. And when federal investigators, like I said about Diddy, when federal investigators are on you, there's not a whole lot you can do. Representatives of Mayor Adams, of course, have said we don't have any comment. But this is going to be interesting. He just took the key to the city back from Diddy, and now the feds on him too. We don't have detail to know what it's about, but I will be doing a live tonight after this where we will talk in greater detail about what's happening with this developing story. But I wanted to make sure that everybody knew that Eric Adams, Mr. Clean Him Up, Mr. Lock Him Up, Mr. Top Cop, has been himself indicted. That's Oleyemi Olorin, needs to come back tonight. Yes, because she is doing such important work in challenging Eric Adams, and her video about Eric Adams is legendary already, and it went viral. So make sure you check that out on Oleyemi Olorin's YouTube channel. Can't wait to read Jamal's book about Mayor Adams and Bishop White. Exactly, it is going to be something. Cop indicted for corruption. Shocker. Look, Again, I don't know if Eric Adams did it or not. I don't want to presume to know. I don't want to presume his guilt. I don't want to cast any aspersions. I don't know the answer. But here's what I do know. Here's what I do know. Here's what I do know. When the feds is on you, they got some evidence. Now, I'm not saying the feds always tell them the truth. But all I'm saying is this ain't going to be no walk in the park for Eric Adams. It's not going to be a walk in the park for Eric Adams. Anyway, we'll talk more about that another time. I want to thank everybody for watching Night School. It has been a night. I'm not done for the night, though, y'all. I feel a lot better, and I am coming back on to do a Gaza report. I'm coming back on to do some other updates. So please, for the next hour or so, just kind of hang around. I'll be right back up in a little bit, but I got some stuff I got to do to make sure that all the tech is ready for the remaining part of the analysis. Let me take Eric Adams off the screen. Y'all don't need to see his ugly mug no more. But sorry for the lack of Gaza updates this week. As you know, that COVID has had me in the chokehold. So I haven't done them, but I will be doing one tonight for sure. And I will be doing some other updates tonight. So thank you all for watching. Make sure you continue to support the channel. Hit the like button, hit the join button, hit the subscribe button. Also, family, I know some of you have said that you had a problem with the Cash App. There's a technical issue with Cash App that I will resolve in the morning. In the meantime, you can send donations to PayPal, Venmo, or Zelle. I don't believe Cash App is going to accept it right now. And the reason is very simple. It's a bureaucratic logistical thing where I'm actually right and they're wrong, and I'm not going to let them try to do something that they don't have a right to do. But PayPal, Venmo, and Zelle, they're on top of it right now. Feel free to drop considered monthly tuition. If everybody watching right now would have dropped $10 in, it would allow us to meet our financial goals for the month. So just something to consider as we get to the final days of the month. Anyway, family, thank you for watching. Thank you for watching. I'll see y'all tomorrow, but I'll see y'all later tonight. I'll see y'all tomorrow for Night School. I'll see you later tonight for the other updates. Talk soon.